Hey, everybody. Welcome. I am so glad to be here with all of you tonight for a late night conversation. Let's do it.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. Wild times that we are living in, but I'm glad to be with you all. So if you are here, you probably know the format already, but in case you don't, first the opening remarks. That's whatever it is I'm going to talk about. Then the roll call, where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. Then from there, I answer your questions for the remainder of the night. And we've already got a few questions that have come in. Questions can be sent via Rumble Rant. If you're on the Rumble, cash at me at Maupin22. But the best way, the absolute best way to send your questions is to go to buymeacoffee.com/CalebMaupin. Amazing way to send your questions. The best way. And somebody has already done it. I already have one question to answer. Would you believe it or not? So it's going to be a good show. I think I have two, actually. There was one left over from last night I didn't get to, from Jacob, I believe. So apologies, Jacob. I will get to your question first. But yeah, we have two questions actually that we're going to get to already, but please send more. Keep me talking. It's going to be good. And I'm really, really looking forward to tonight's conversation. Now, quick reminder that this is not simply about building social media content, right? If I was just trying to build a brand, I would do, videos about how to get women, or I don't know, what do people make videos about, or about how to make a paper mache mustache or something. I don't know. But anyway, I'm not doing that. I'm building an organization. We're building a movement. It's called the Center for Political Innovation. Our website is CPIUSA.org. And this is our group. If you want to know what we're about, check us out. So join the Center for Political Innovation. Join our organization. You can go to our website and become a member today. It's a very simple thing. You just fill out the thing. You can become a member. Then you'll start getting invited to the Saturday members meetings. Check your inbox, check your spam. And once you're there, we'll plug you in and you'll be doing all kinds of great stuff. It's great to be a member of our organization. So get involved. Other than that, like I said, we'll be following our normal roll call, or our normal format. First, the opening remarks, then the roll call, where we find out who's watching, names and locations. And then from there, I answer your questions. So if there's something you would like me to talk about in the second half of the show, by all means, send a question. Rumble Rants on the Rumble. You can cash at me at CalebMaupin22. But the best way to send questions, buymeacoffee.com. So, all right. So, folks, a lot is happening. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. Iran is fighting back for its life as, Trump is raining death and murder on Iran. Ali Larijani, an important Iranian official who was a primary advocate of negotiations with the United States, I may add, was murdered. He was killed, right? Just like they killed the supreme leader, Khamenei. They also killed Ali Larijani. I had the honor of meeting Ali Larijani in 2015 at the United Nations. This is my encounter with the great Iranian leader. At that point, he was the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, and he had come to New York City in regards to the Iran nuclear deal. And I spoke to him. I've done my stuff, I've been around, and I know what I'm talking about when it comes to Iran. What is the United States trying to achieve? What on earth is the United States trying to achieve with this war? That is what we're going to be talking about tonight, because I think it's not exactly clear. And what is particularly weird, many people have pointed out, is that usually there's a stated goal with a war, right? Yeah, there's a stated goal. In this war, there is no stated goal. The stated goal is unclear. First, it was about Iran's non-existent nuclear program, which Trump claimed had been completely eliminated last year when it never existed to begin with. Iran has always complied with the International Atomic Energy Agency. They've never been in violation. Every nuclear site they have is monitored 24 hours a day by the International Atomic Energy Agency. They have signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And then Trump blew up their uranium enrichment site that was monitored. He blew it up last summer. So there is absolutely no Iranian nuclear threat and never has been one. If Iran were to pull out of the nuclear, proliferation treaty, then there might be one. If Iran were to somehow be found to be not complying with it, there might be one. But there isn't one. And there is no Iranian nuclear threat. There never has been. Meanwhile, Israel has hundreds and hundreds of nuclear weapons. And everyone knows this. And the USA doesn't acknowledge this, because if they did, then the USA would have to end all aid to Israel, as it would then be illegal. Now, I actually confronted the State Department about this. So again, this is one of those, situations where, I know what I'm talking about, and I'll put that on, that Israel has hundreds of nuclear weapons. No country in the Middle East other than Israel has nukes. And we're to believe that Iran might potentially down the road get one if they at some point violate a treaty that they're fully complying with. I mean, the whole Iranian nuclear threat is bullshit. It is absolute bullshit. And Iran has never been a nuclear threat. So that's not what this is about. That's what Trump first said it was about. And here is my confrontation with John Kirby at the U.S. State Department about this very issue.
So an email has recently come to light, an exchange between Jeffrey Leeds and former Secretary of State Colin Powell, in which he acknowledges that Israel has, quote, he says 200 nuclear weapons. And the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty has not been signed by Israel. Under U.S. law, the United States should cut off support to Israel because it's a nuclear power that has not signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, according to Colin Powell, correct?
Shouldn't you ask Colin Powell that? I'm not going to speak to this particular traffic, and I'm certainly not going to discuss.
Israel doesn't have nuclear weapons?
I'm certainly not going to discuss matters of intelligence from the podium. I'm not. I have no comment on that.
Okay. Well, the email says the boys in Tehran know Israel has 200, all we targeted on Tehran, and we have thousands. I mean, that seems to indicate that there's a knowledge of an Israeli nuclear program, which would make U.S. aid to Israel illegal.
I think I've answered your question.
Okay. Well, let me ask. Is that, do I have the correct understanding of U.S. law that we're not allowed to support a nuclear power that has not signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty?
Look, we obviously support the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. I'm not a legal expert on all the tenets of it, and I'm certainly not going to speak about the details that you've revealed here in this email traffic. That would be inappropriate for me to discuss one way or the other. I'm not going to do it.
There are sanctions imposed on North Korea in response to their nuclear proliferation. There were sanctions put on Iran in response to allegations of nuclear proliferation. And now we have this email from Colin Powell saying that Israel has 200 nuclear weapons. Why is Israel not facing any consequence for this?
It's a very colorful way of getting back to the same question you just asked me, but I'm going to refer you back to the transcript when you see it this afternoon to what I said before to your question. Saeed?
You're familiar with this email, right?
I'm not.
Oh.
I have not seen it. I can't speak to the email, and frankly, even if I'd seen it, sir, I wouldn't engage in that kind of a discussion from the podium.
Yeah. So, Israel's got 200 nuclear weapons, according to Colin Powell. And we're concerned that maybe in the future, Iran might get one. And that in and of itself is worth a war that has probably already killed at least hundreds of people. This is insane. And Trump said, well, we want to make sure Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. Iran's position for 47 years has been, we do not want a nuclear weapon. Now that might change, especially in light of what recently occurred. That might change, but as of now, Iran's position is still what it has been since 1979, which is we don't want nuclear weapons. So the idea that this war is to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, that's not what this is about. And so what is this really about? Now, Joe Kent, who was the U.S. counterterrorism director, resigned. That's a big deal when the counterterrorism director of the United States resigns. Yesterday, somebody who was a very high-ranking government official, somebody who is decorated as a combat veteran, served 11 missions as a Green Beret, CIA paramilitary expert, had risen up the rank of, counterterrorism director. His wife died at the hands of ISIS. He stepped down and resigned. And this is a really big deal. It's a really, really big deal. And immediately after he stepped down, he didn't go quietly. He's speaking up. And he went to Tucker Carlson today, and they say he was singing like a choir boy. He opened his mouth about what's really going on in the administration. This is amazing. I have never seen anything like this. He didn't just step down. There are plenty of U.S. government officials who have stepped down in response to, in policy, right? But this is big. This is an official who stepped down and is like the next day. This is, he stepped down yesterday, and today he went to Tucker Carlson.
Well, wait a second. If we do this and kill the Ayatollah, because that was like the first order, I think, what are the effects after? And like, what's the goal? Did these debates ever
I know they happened heavily before the 12-day war. I think that when the Israelis came back around and said they wanted to do this, I just don't think there was any debate. I think just based on the ecosystem and the amount of influence that was exerted.
Because in some ways, this is a little humiliating.
Yeah. This was done at the orders of Israel. Israel said, we want you to have a war. And the American government said, yes, sir. Yes, sir. He's revealing this, that we're not being governed by the American government. It's one thing. For the longest time, I've been agitating and explaining that we're ruled by a group of rich people who don't care about us. Now we're not ruled by a group of American rich people who don't care about us. We're ruled by a group of rich people in Israel who don't care about us. And we have the U.S. counterterrorism director confirming this and saying that, yeah, that's the case.
Who are coming after me. I believe that the internet is like 25% real. I think there's a lot of bots. There's a lot of people who got delivered.
By the way, I've been saying that for a long time too. The internet is overwhelmingly fake.
A talking point, and they're going to get a paycheck for it.
I've noticed.
Or they just, they want the adoration. So I just don't take most of it seriously. And again, look, I know there's some of my former colleagues, people who I do like, who have had to come after me, and I understand that too. Like, I get it. Like, they're still there. They've got to discredit everything I'm saying right now. They're watching, taking notes. So I'm not bitter about that. I literally just want to focus on the task at hand, and the task at hand is stopping us from getting deeper into this quagmire. Because again, like just looking back on my experiences in Iraq, I don't feel like this happened. There wasn't the ability to. There wasn't this platform. There wasn't, the free independent media that existed in any real way that could reach people.
That's right.
And so to me, we have this opportunity. So I'll be bitter and angry later when I read Twitter and somebody who I used to like says that Joe Kent's a traitor and we're going to fire him tomorrow anyways. We don't have time for that. Like as you pointed out, major things are happening right now in this war, and the president is facing some very, very challenging decisions. So I personally just hope that he and his closest advisors listen and think, and that's the main priority.
Yeah. Also, there was another bombshell in this interview. I'm just throwing this out there. I mean, while we're looking at Joe Kent clips, this was also a huge bombshell.
Each other, and the last time I saw Charlie Kirk on this earth was in June, in the West Wing in the stairway, and I said hi to him, and he looked me in the eye, and he said very loudly, and it's a small. You've been in the West Wing. It's small. It's a tight space, and he said, "Joe, stop us from getting into a war with Iran." Very loudly.
He was single-minded,
and he walked off, and he went, I believe, into the Oval. So when one of President Trump's closest advisors, who is vocally advocating for us to not go to war with Iran and for us to rethink at least our relationship with the Israelis, and then he's suddenly publicly assassinated, and we're not allowed to ask any questions about that. It's a data point. It's a data point that we need to look into.
What do you mean when you say we're not allowed to ask any questions about that?
We've been told that this individual, Robinson, is a lone gunman, and maybe he is. But the investigation that I was a part of, the National Counterterrorism Center was a part of, we were stopped from continuing to investigate. And the FBI will say that they
bing, 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 bing.
Stopped that because they wanted to have turn everything over to the Utah state authorities. Everything's going to trial. It's very, very sensitive. But there was still a lot for us to look into that I can't really get into. But there was still linkage for us to investigate that we needed to run down. And I'm not making any conclusions. I'm not saying
no, I don't think you are.
Because of this happened. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying there's unanswered questions. We know the pressure because of the text messages that have been made public, that Charlie was under a lot of pressure from a lot of pro-Israel donors. And again, we know Charlie was advocating to President Trump against this war with Iran.
Yeah. So, folks, so we have now the director of counterterrorism of the American government coming out, and one, saying Israel runs U.S. foreign policy, two, saying Iran is not a nuclear threat, and three, saying we were trying to investigate killing Charlie Kirk. I knew Charlie Kirk. He was very opposed to war with Iran, and he was talking about the power of the Israel lobby. Candace Owens has said the same thing. And now he's saying, and then we were investigating his killing, and they made us stop. Folks, this is big. This is very, very, very big. And I mean, everything I've been trying to tell you all on this channel for a long time is true. It is true. And tonight, we're going to talk about a couple different aspects of this, but there has never been a better time to be CPI. This is one of those worst of times, best of times situations, right? This is absolutely disastrous. We are on the brink of World War III, and I'm going to tell you why we're on the brink of World War III. But on the other hand, I believe that those of us that are anti-imperialists, those of us who are members of our organization, those of us who are out in the streets day after day saying no war with Iran, those of us who have studied our material and learned about globalism, imperialism, and what it's all about, we were born to be here at this time. We are on this earth right now for a reason, because we have the answer. We have the answer. And it's the American people are ready for our answer. They've never been more ready for our answer. We have what people are looking for, and now it is time to give it to them. Folks, I'm an innovationist, and we have an ideology called innovationism. I was part of the communist left for a long time, but we've moved in a new direction. The left has kind of lost its mind, but we've taken what we learned from Marxism about the problems of production organized for profit, about how from the system of production organized for profit flows the monopolistic stage of imperialism and the rule of financiers dominating global markets and holding back international development. And we understand that we do not live in a world of nation states. We live in a world of global finance capital and international financial oligarchy that rules over the world, the power of money. That's what we live under. And that system needs poverty. That system can't handle the fact that human beings are creative creatures and continue to invent and expand and build. And that human beings have invented very, very efficient mechanisms for creating and producing. And that the only way the ultra-rich monopolies can stay at the top is to roll backwards the wheels of history. They want wheels of history to roll backward so that they can stay at the top indefinitely. And there are big chunks of the world that have broken out of their dominance. And China has said, you know, you kept us as the sick man of Asia. You kept us as your impoverished captive market, your impoverished playground. You had signs in our parks that said no dogs or Chinese allowed. We were kept in utter poverty. Our life expectancy was very low. We were illiterate and underdeveloped. And so we kicked you out. And in 1949, we had a revolution. And with that revolution, we built our first power plants and our first steel mills. And now 800 million people in China have been lifted out of poverty. And now we have the second largest economy in the world. We're not going to be part of your financial empire of poverty. We're not going to be a captive market that you can dump drugs on with your opium wars. We're going to be independent, right? HSBC Bank was a British Empire bank that was created to dump opium and impoverish and enslave the Chinese people. They booted them out of there and they built themselves up. And the Russian Revolution, what was it about? It was that Russia was an impoverished country and they kicked out the British and they kicked out the Western financial system. And with Stalin's 5-year economic plans, they mobilized that country and they built the world's largest steel industry and they invented space travel and they wiped out illiteracy and they became a modern superpower. And in Libya, you know, they were an oil-rich country on the African continent, but they were deeply impoverished. Most people didn't know their birthday. Most people couldn't read. And then a guy named Muammar Gaddafi, who was a very skilled military officer, he led the rank and file soldiers to rise up and overthrow the puppet king, who was a puppet of the British Empire, and seize control of their oil. And they built Libya up into being a modern country, a country with the world's largest irrigation system, a country with the highest life expectancy on the African continent. In country after country, this is the story. And that you can argue it's about communism or capitalism, but people don't understand that, right? They think, you know, communism, they think it's about making everybody equal. It's not about making everybody equal. It's that these countries were kept under the boot of ultra monopolies that were keeping them in poverty. And these countries kicked out those ultra monopolies and began to assert their economic independence. And in order to do that, they had to centralize their economy. They couldn't have the free market because then the big monopolies would sink their fangs into the country. In order to build their country up, they had to have central planning. They had to have a revolutionary state rooted in the struggle against colonialism that would take control of their economy and build them up. And that's what the revolutions of the 20th century and the continuing revolutions of the 21st century were about. Growth. It was impoverished countries in the colonized world fighting to build, struggling to build. And that's what it was. And then they built Russia into a modern industrial country. They built China into the second largest economy in the world. They built Libya. They built up Iran. And I've been to Iran. And you should see, they're not Marxists. They are Islamic revolutionary Shia Muslims. But they have built in Iran. They have electrified that entire country. They have built huge modern highways. They have done amazing things. They've wiped out illiteracy. They have full employment. Iran, with its 1979 revolution, Khomeini said, we're going to have a construction jihad, and they built, right? And that is what all these revolutions are about, building. It's a struggle to build. It's a struggle to construct. It's about growth, that human beings naturally want more than they already have. We want a life expectancy to increase. We want our population to rise. We want our standard of living to increase. People want to build, to grow, to expand is natural. It is the natural state of being. But there are certain people in this world that are already at the top, and they have decided that they must stay at the top forever, so growth must end. That's what they've decided. And the British Empire, they were at the top of the world in the 1800s, but there was continued economic crisis and hardship. And so they found the writings of an economist named Malthus, Robert Thomas Malthus, from the 1700s. And they formed, with the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, they formed the Neo-Malthusian Society. And they began emphasizing overpopulation. Overpopulation. There are too many people in the world. These poor people are breeding too much, and we've got to stop these poor people from breeding. And the Malthusians created the World Economic Forum. They created the Council on Foreign Relations. They created the Rhodes Scholar Program. And they developed an ideology that was, we must stop human beings from growing in order to maintain our position at the top and maintain stability in this world. Malthusianism is the ideology of the ultra rich. And that is what they do. And they go around the world degrowing countries. And Iraq was a strong country in the Middle East, and the USA degrew it and blew it to bits. And hundreds of thousands of people died. Millions became refugees. And Iraq was degrown. Libya, until 2011, had the highest life expectancy on the African continent. But then NATO bombs went in there and they degrew it and they destroyed it, right? And, you know, you can go down the line. So many countries have been degrown by imperialism, by globalism. They are struggling to keep the world in poverty in order to keep their system going. However, they're not stopping. They're not stopping at countries on the African continent. They're not stopping at countries in South America. They're not stopping in Asia. Now they are bringing that degrowth home because their need to degrow is rooted in the irrationality of their economic system. We have an economic system where profits come before people, and human beings, they sell their labor power to survive, and human technology has advanced to the point that they need degrowth more than ever to save their system. And it's not just enough to just degrow South America. It's not enough to just degrow Africa. It's not enough to just degrow Asia. Now they've got to degrow Ohio and Texas and Pennsylvania and Alabama and Georgia. And they're coming to degrow all of us to save their system. They are creating a low-wage police state in America and psyching us up for World War III to beat down and recolonize all the countries that have broken free from their grip. That whole section of the world centered around Russia and China and Iran and Venezuela and Cuba and Nicaragua and the Union of Sahel states on the African continent, they realize the only way they can keep their system going is to lock us down and depopulate us and drive down the population here and launch an all-out war to destroy the countries that have already ripped free from their grip. And that's what they're trying to do. And we, the American people, are not going to accept it. We don't want to be degrown because the secret of America is that from all over the world, people have come here and they've jumped over fences here and they've piled onto boats to get here. And why did they come to America? Why did people come to this country generation after generation after generation? Why did they come to America? Because they wanted to grow. Because they wanted a better life for their kids, a better life for their family members. And so now they've piled people into this country from every corner of the world. There are African people here. There are Middle Eastern people here. There are people from every corner of this world, right? African people that were brought here in chains, didn't even have a choice, survived genocidal conditions to survive the hell of slavery. The Chicano people, the native people that say, we didn't cross the border crossed us. All over the world, we have people from the Middle East. We have people from India here. We got people from China here. We got multiple generations of people from many different corners of the globe, all piled into America because they want growth. And now the satanic leaders that run this country that are tied in with an international financial system, they're saying, no, you guys can't grow anymore. No more growth. We're calling off growth. Well, they made a huge mistake because they have assembled an army of people right here in America, of people that have come here because they believe in growth. And they have assembled the army that is gathered here from every corner of the world. And we've gathered here to say with one voice, we are going to kick your ass and we are going to drive you out and we are going to free America from this dying international system. We will not be canceled. We will not be degrown. We will not be depopulated. We will not be destroyed. We are going to fight and build. And we're going to have an America that will join with Russia, join with China, join with Iran and Venezuela and Cuba, and break out of this dying international financial order. An anti-monopoly coalition is going to be formed here in America of working people, of small business owners, even some of the rich that are not part of that elitist degrowth club. And we are going to break this country out of their nightmare degrowth system. And we are going to have a government of action that fights for working families and invests in communities. It is about growth versus degrowth. That is what it is about. And human beings naturally want to grow. Anyone who tells you growth is bad is trying to kill you. We want economic growth. But this system, the globalists and the monopolies, they can't handle economic growth because it means they're no longer at the top. And they're trying their best to keep the world poor and make the world poorer and depopulate. And we will not accept this. Rosa Luxemburg in Germany predicted this. She said that this is what would happen to the West. This is Rosa Luxemburg, the great Marxist intellectual. She famously said, as World War I was breaking out, she wrote, "This world war is a regression into barbarism. The triumph of imperialism leads to the annihilation of civilization. At first, this happens sporadically for the duration of a modern war. But then when the period of unlimited wars begins, it progresses towards its inevitable consequences. The triumph of imperialism and the collapse of all civilization, as in ancient Rome, depopulation, desolation, degeneration, a great cemetery." She saw this coming, that the war addiction, the need of war for death and destruction, the need to degrow and destroy in order to stabilize the country, in order to stabilize their global system and the rule of the international monopolies, was going to become like an addiction, right? If someone's becoming a drug addict, at first, right, they get high once because it feels good, and then they get high again because it feels good, and pretty soon it gets to the point where they've got to get high just to feel normal. And then it gets to the point where even that normal that they feel, because they have to be high just to feel normal, is a lower and lower normal, where they're not even really feeling healthy when they're feeling healthy. And it gets to the point that eventually the drug kills them. And that's what imperialism is. Imperialism needs war. The globalist imperialist system needs war in order to keep itself grinding. It's got to beat down every country that gets in its way. It's got to do something about the fact that there's so many people and the human population just keeps rising. And it is rooted in the economic failures of their system. And that is what is driving them. They have to have war. They have to have war. But it's even crazier than that. Folks, I don't know if you've ever read about the Mau Mau revolt in Kenya, right? But the British Empire, they set up a colony in Kenya. And why did the British colonize people? Let's just talk about that. I think I got a slideshow presentation here where I got the quote. I got actually the quote from, what is it? Yeah. I've got the quote from Cecil Rhodes, right? Okay, what did Cecil Rhodes say? Do I have the quote from Cecil Rhodes? I used to have the quote from Cecil Rhodes. Well, I don't have the quote from Cecil Rhodes here, so I'll just read it to you. Cecil Rhodes was a British colonizer, a British imperialist, and he explained why it was that the British had to colonize Africa. He explained it very blatantly. He was quoted in 1895 explaining the basis of imperialism. And I will quote Cecil Rhodes because this is important, right? This is Cecil Rhodes. And if you have our textbook, We Are City Builders, this is on page 27. In 1895, Rhodes said, "I was in the East End of London, a working class quarter, yesterday, and I attended a meeting of the unemployed. And it was just a cry for bread, bread, bread. And on my way home, I pondered the importance of the scene and became ever more convinced of the necessity of imperialism. My cherished idea is the solution to the social problem. In order to save the 400 million inhabitants of the United Kingdom from a bloody civil war, we colonial statesmen must acquire new lands. And why? To settle the surplus population, to provide new markets for the goods produced in the factories and mines. The empire, as I have always said, is a bread and butter question. If we want to avoid civil war, we must become imperialists. So basically, the economic system in Britain wasn't providing employment. There were millions of British people who didn't have a place at the assembly line, and the stores were packed with products that couldn't be sold. And so they had to start seizing parts of the world to send people to go to be overseers and settlers. And on top of that, they had to dump their products. And that's what the British did. When the British went to India, they burned all the looms and they forced the people of India to import their cloth from Britain. And before Iraq was destroyed by the United States, all kinds of countries were buying their oil from Iraq. And the USA blew it up. And now everyone who was buying their oil from Iraq is getting it from Saudi Arabia, that's in bed with American oil companies, is getting it from ExxonMobil and BP and Shell and Chevron. It's about clearing the market and maintaining the world as your captive market and preventing any competition from emerging. It's about dealing with the fact that we have so many people and there's no place for them at the assembly line, and we're producing more products than we can sell. This is the roots of the economic system. This is the tendency of the falling rate of profit, the problem of overproduction. That's what all of this is rooted in. It is the natural, unstable workings of their system that drives them to constantly need to acquire new territories. And so the British took over big chunks of the African continent. Cecil Rhodes is the colonizer who said that. And have you ever heard of the Rhodes Scholar Program? That's from Cecil Rhodes. And on top of that, I might add, have you ever heard of Rhodesia? All right, Zimbabwe, before it won its independence, was called Rhodesia after Cecil Rhodes, the colonizer. And the British seized all kinds of parts of Africa. In Kenya, Kenya became a British colony. And the people of Kenya were enslaved. It was an apartheid system, and there were a bunch of white settlers there. And the Mau Mau revolt in Kenya, where the Land and Freedom Army that was called the Mau Mau rose up against the British Empire, was a major uprising, the Mau Mau revolt in the 1950s, where the people of Kenya rose up to fight the British Empire. It's a very interesting case study because it's from that event that we have the term countergang. And it's also from that event that we can understand what is happening now in regards to Israel and why it is the USA is going to war with Iran. So in Kenya, you had a bunch of settlers, white European settlers there, and you had a bunch of black people that were the majority of the people that lived there, the population largely. And the black people rose up and revolted against the British Empire. And the British Empire had to crush the revolt in order to keep their colony. There was fear that Kenya would join the Soviet Union, that the Mau Mau, maybe they were getting support. I don't think it's ever been proven that they got any Soviet support, but they basically understood that if the Kenyan people kicked the British Empire out, that they would create a communist society or align with the Soviet Union. The British couldn't have it. So what did the British do? They sent their military there to battle against the Kenyan people. And Frank Kitson was the head of the intelligence wing of the British military. And they developed a tactic of creating what they called counter gangs, fake rebels, fake revolutionaries who went around, confusing everybody. And that was one tactic they developed, is they had fake revolutionaries. And eventually, though, even having counter gangs didn't work. And if you read the book Imperial Reckoning, which is a history of the Mau Mau revolt, what they ultimately did is they just started going into areas and they would round up all the men and put them in these mini concentration camps until they found the rebels. And that's how they crushed the Mau Mau revolt in Kenya. It was very, very awful, right? But they used counter gangs to manipulate, and they developed modern counterinsurgency techniques, which is something I've written a lot about counter gangs, etc. But on top of that, there's something else that happened during the Kenyan Mau Mau revolt, and this is very important. Some of the British settlers, the white settlers of Kenya, thought that the British army wasn't doing enough, right? The British army, they learned that they were all white. There were a few black people who fought for the British Empire, but not very many. They were all white. And if they went into an area where there was a whole lot of black people and they just started killing people, everyone would sympathize with the Mau Mau rebels. And so the British Empire started to work very, very hard to improve its image, to not look like occupiers, to go into the area and be very friendly and give money to local business owners and try to just isolate the rebels and play Mr. Nice Guy. And that was part of their counterinsurgency. And then they had the counter gangs that confused everybody. And as they were changing their tactic to use counter gangs and try to make the British Empire look nice, the local white people didn't like that, because the white people wanted the British Empire to go in there and kill those Mau Mau and go in there and, get the black people to obey them again. So there was actually an uprising by the white settlers of Kenya against the British Empire. They formed their own army that went around killing black people against the orders of the British Army. And there were actually armed battles between white European settlers who thought the British Army was being weak and not strong-handed with the Mau Mau. Whereas the British Empire, they were trying to be strategic in how they fought the Mau Mau. And they were trying to be soft-handed and engage in counter-gang and manipulation. And these white settlers, these white, people that lived there that were just terrified of the Mau Mau and hated the black people, they weren't taking orders from the British Empire. They formed their own armed militias and went and killed random black people. And at one point, the British Army actually had fights with these settler militias that were formed. That's what's happening right now, right? It became a situation where the settlers who'd been sent there by the British Empire, they'd been sent there by the British Empire to rule Kenya on behalf of the British Empire. When there was a revolt, they said, we're going to fight the black people on our own terms, and we're going to do it our way. We're not going to listen to the British Empire. And the British Empire was saying to them, guys, can you please cut it out? We're trying to actually fight them strategically. And they said, no, we're going to do it our own way. That's what's happening. That's what's happening right now. That is exactly what is happening right now in regards to the Middle East. That is the situation that we are in. And I will tell you why. And I'll tell you why, because I've been directly involved in it. Why did I meet Ali Larijani at the United Nations? Why have I been to Iran? I was in Iran. And when was I there? When was this photo taken at the United Nations? When was the documentary film you can find on my website, cpiusa.org or calebmaupinbooks.com? When was that film made? It was made in 2015. What happened in 2015? That was the year of the Iran nuclear deal. All right. In 2015, John Kerry, who was Secretary of State, and Javad Zarif, who was the Iranian foreign minister, met in Switzerland, in Geneva, and they, for months, negotiated and ultimately came up with what they called the P5+1 nuclear conclusion. And I know a thing or two about it. I know a thing or two about it because I met Javad Zarif, and I was in Iran very heavily during this time. And what was going on was that Obama and a wing of the Israeli military, right, the more moderate wing of the Israeli military and the British Empire, their strategy for fighting Iran was this, right, that they saw Iran as an outpost of anti-imperialism. And their strategy for fighting Iran was, we're going to go to Iran and we're going to get them to completely give up their nuclear program. And in exchange, we're going to lift the sanctions against them, and we're going to get American businesses into Iran to invest. And most of the Iranian people were born after the revolution. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into Iran, and we're going to make them give up almost all their power plants. But in exchange for that, we're going to end the sanctions, and we're going to invest in there, and we're going to subsidize and boost the reformist wing of the Iranian government, right? People like Rouhani, the moderates. And those moderates are going to be in office, and we're going to infiltrate the government and have the moderates gradually start taking apart the Islamic Republic. And it'll get to the point that the moderates get so bad, and they're so obviously collaborating with the United States, that the Revolutionary Guards will seize control of the government, and it'll be an obvious coup. And at that point, we'll have all the young Iranians who look at Facebook and Twitter go out into the streets and protest for democracy and freedom, and we'll have a color revolution in Iran. And that's actually what was done in the Soviet Union, right? The USA enabled, got nicey-nicey with the Soviet Union, and Bernie Sanders was over there shaking hands. I love the Soviet Union. And they sent all the liberals over there, and they had days of nuclear protest, and the US government, a new generation in the Soviet leadership came in, and Gorbachev came into office, and Gorbachev was a moderate, and Gorbachev started selling out everything that the Soviet Union stood for. He pulled the troops out of Afghanistan, and he said, I loved Ronald Reagan. And it got to the point that Gorbachev was so obviously just taking apart the Soviet government that the hardliners in the Communist Party arrested him. And at that point, Boris Yeltsin got all the young people out in the streets, and they had a color revolution, and the Soviet Union was brought down. And that was their strategy with Iran, is that they were going to boost the reformist wing and get Rouhani in there. And Rouhani got record votes from young Iranians who voted for him. And the idea was that very gradually, by playing nice with Iran, they would be able to gradually, strategically overturn the Islamic Revolution. That was their strategy. And I didn't exactly have this figured out when I was in Iran. But when I was in Iran, many times I spoke at universities and people would ask me, they'd say, Caleb, should we sign the Iran nuclear deal? And my answer was always, I don't know. That was the right answer. And there were people that wanted me to say yes, and there were people that wanted me to say no. Other Americans on the trip got angry with me, and they said, Caleb, they're always asking you if they should sign the nuclear deal. You should say yes, or you should say no. And I said, I'm not saying either, because it's up to Iran to decide. And what if Iran signs this deal and it goes badly? Or what if Iran doesn't sign this deal and it goes badly? It's not my job to tell the Iranians what to do. I figured if I was there telling the Iranians not to sign the deal, that'd be kind of like being an activist against my own country. I wasn't going to do that. On top of that, though, at the same time, I wasn't going to go there and tell them to sign that deal because, I mean, I had a feeling that the USA might betray them and stab them in the back, and I didn't want to be helping that happen. So whenever I was in Iran, I said, I don't know. And people got angry with me. And there were certain activists from America, like black activists, who got really mad. Why are you not helping promote this deal? And then there were also some like right-wing, like, you know, I don't know what you want to call them, right-wing activists that were there. Why are you not warning them about how the deal is a big conspiracy? And I said, I'm here to say I don't know. But I realize now that no matter what I did, right, when I was in Iran, I was helping sell the nuclear deal, which was not my intention. I went there as an activist. I'd been involved in Occupy Wall Street. I had been the spokesperson for Ramsey Clark. My job when I was in Iran, I'm an anti-imperialist, and I stood with the Iranian people against imperialism. However, no matter what I did, I was subtly helping Obama sell the nuclear deal. And why? Every time I was in Iran, and I mean, every university I spoke to, somebody would raise their hand or come up to me after I was speaking, and they would say this to me. They would say, Caleb, what's going to happen to you when you go back to America because you came to Iran and gave this speech condemning American imperialism? And I would have to be honest with them, and I'd say nothing. And they'd say, really? Well, Caleb, you know, if we go to America and give speeches against the Iranian government, when we come back here, we'll go to jail. Well, that's true. And I would say that's because Iran is under very, very different conditions than the United States, right? America is pretty well at peace, pretty stable. Iran has been fighting for its life, and I would explain that, but it didn't matter what I said. I was proof that America was a more free and open society than Iran was. And I show that there are people in America who don't support Israel and don't, you know, and can see through the lies. And I don't hate Muslims. And, you know, and so in a way, I was subtly promoting the Iran nuclear deal, which was not my intention, you know, and there's nothing I can do about that. I gave the right answer every time I was asked, but I was subtly promoting the nuclear deal. And I realized that. Nothing I can do about it. That's just part of the situation. I mean, that's just how it was, right? I could have gone there and said absolutely nothing, and I would have still been promoting the Iran nuclear deal. Just me being there and being myself kind of helped Obama sell the nuclear deal. But that was Obama's strategy. Obama was like the British Empire in Kenya. They said, okay, if we go into the black, you know, village and we start just killing people and shooting, all the black people are going to side with the Mau Mau. We're going to play nicey, and we're going to set up a counter gang, and we're going to do all of this. But here's the thing. What happened? Obama signed the Iran nuclear deal. And before Obama signed the nuclear deal, what happened? Netanyahu came to the U.S. Congress and gave a speech to a joint session of Congress denouncing the president of the United States. That is crazy, right? We have had many foreign leaders come to the United States and give speeches to joint sessions of Congress. And that's fine. But never in American history have we brought a foreign leader to our Congress to give a speech against our president. Never. Could you imagine, right? If you know, the Democrats took control of Congress and they said, you know what, we're going to fly in Xi Jinping from China to give a speech against Trump. That would never happen. Could you imagine if the Democrats retook control of Congress and they said, we're going to fly in the leader of some, you know, South American country to give a speech against President Trump? That would never happen. Or imagine, right? That the Republicans had taken control of Congress during Obama's administration. They said, all right, we're going to fly in Vladimir Putin to give a speech against Obama. That would never happen. But Israel gets a special pass. And everybody knows that. Israel can get away with whatever they wanted. And so Obama was our president. The U.S. Congress was on the verge of passing the nuclear deal, which they did. Obama overruled their veto and it passed. But regardless, before that, they flew in a foreign head of state and they had an anti-Iran rally on the floors of Congress. And Benjamin Netanyahu, a foreign president, walked into the halls of Congress and gave a 2-hour speech against Barack Obama. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. We flew in a foreign head of state and his speech was broadcast live on CNN and on Fox and all these things. And before he did it, you'll notice Benjamin Netanyahu's military, all his generals wrote him a letter and said, don't do this. Don't do this. And he did it anyway. And if you read the letter, the Israeli generals said, America gives us all our weapons and America gives us all our aid. And Obama's the president of America. And yeah, the Iran nuclear deal might not be good, but don't do this. Just don't do this. And Netanyahu didn't listen to them. And Netanyahu came to the U.S. Congress and he gave a speech condemning Barack Obama to a joint session of Congress. And the Iran nuclear deal, Congress voted against it, but Obama, it was not enough. And Obama overruled their veto and the Iran nuclear deal went through. And Iran shut down almost all of their nuclear power sites. And in exchange, the USA lifted some sanctions on them. And there was a moment of economic celebration in Iran, right? And it was a lot of people were happy. And then what happened? Trump got elected and Trump ripped up the Iran nuclear deal and he pulled the United States out of it. And then he murdered Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian national hero, right? The leader of the Iranian military Revolutionary Guards, who was considered a national hero. At the time, I said I knew what Trump was trying to do. He was trying to make sure that the Iranian nuclear deal never came back. And then Biden came back into office and Biden said he was going to get America back into the Iran nuclear deal, but he never did. Never did. And then Trump came into office and not only did he, continue to antagonize Iran, he bombed Iran and now we're in all-out war with Iran. Why? Because Netanyahu, who votes for Netanyahu, right? Netanyahu's support tends to be people in Israel that are more recent immigrants, right? People who moved to Israel since the 1980s and 90s, who tend to be from Eastern Europe, people, Jews who fled to Israel after the fall of the Soviet Union, who really don't feel like they're part of the collective West. They don't feel like Israel's part of the Western world. They just are concerned about themselves. And they really, really, really hate Muslims. And they tend to live in settlements in the West Bank. And Netanyahu's supporters are like those Kenyans who revolted against the British Army. They don't care. They want to kill Arabs. They don't care. They want war with Iran. And what has happened is that this is like the Mau Mau revolt in Kenya, where those white settlers rose up against the British Army because it was holding them back. Israel has risen up against American imperialism because it's holding them back. And Israel is so powerful that even though America gives them all their weapons, even though America gives them all the money, Israel has said, we're not going to take orders from America. We're actually going to tell America what to do. And this is a situation where if you imagine that those white settlers in Kenya had been able to not only fight the British military in the process of the British military trying to be strategic as they fought the Mau Mau, but the Kenyan settlers actually ordered the British Empire to do what they wanted. That's what's happening here. That is what is happening here. Israel, with its own short-term interest that does not care about the overall interests of American imperialism, that is not interested in America being, strategically, gradually rolling back the Iranian Revolution. They're not interested in that. They just want to kill them some Arabs. They just want to kill them some Muslims. That's what they want to do, right? They are fanatical, bloodthirsty, hateful people, right? And they are not interested in the overall interest of American imperialism. They're not interested in playing the long game and trying to find an Iranian Gorbachev that'll gradually get in and court the younger generation with Facebook. They don't care about that. And honestly, they don't really care about overthrowing the Islamic Republic either. what it really gets down to is that Israel needs there to be as much chaos in that region as possible. Right? They need there to be an Iranian threat so that America gives them a lot more weapons, so that Netanyahu keeps winning elections. The last thing they would ever want is Iran to chill out and get friendlier to America. They really, really don't want a moderate Iran. And that's why they killed the guy in Iran who was one of the main advocates of negotiating with America, right? Iran has now suffered the death of their supreme leader. Iran has now been bombed. They blew up an elementary school, which I do not think was an accident. The goal is to make sure that Iran, not only is Iran somewhat militarily weakened and damaged, but Iran is as radical and hardline as possible so that they can fundraise and they can sell lots of weapons and they can, make sure that Netanyahu wins every election until the end of time and that they can, have chaos throughout the region. That's what they're looking for. The goal here is not, I don't think, to overthrow the Islamic Republic. Now, they would like that, but I don't know if that's realistic for them. The goal is to make sure nothing like the Iran nuclear deal ever happens again. And that's what Israel wants. And the American imperialists and the Council on Foreign Relations and the smart people that backed Barack Hussein Obama, they were playing a long game to try and advance the interests of American imperialism. And Israel said, no, we're not going to play your long game. And they have overruled that long game strategy. And they basically have forced and dragged the United States into this conflict and forced the United States to do what is not in its long-term geostrategic interest, but will, in the short term, benefit Israel. The result will be Israel, playing up the Iranian threat. The result will be Israel selling lots of weapons, Netanyahu winning elections. It's not just Israel. It is Likud, the Likud wing of Israel that is tied in with the new right in Europe, that is tied in with a lot of business owners and all of that, and with the military-industrial complex. They have decided this is what they want. In the short term, they're not concerned about the long-term results. And that's what you need to understand about this. The other thing, though, and that this is a factor, this is an important factor, right? I've long pointed out that it seems like in the last decade, the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats is the Republicans want to go after China, while the Democrats want to go after Russia, right? Russia and China are the two Eurasian superpowers. They are the main force of opposition to Wall Street running the world. And they play two distinctly different roles. Russia is the center of the world's oil markets, right? Russia is the leading oil exporting country in the world. They have a huge amount of oil. They also have natural gas. Russia is an energy superpower. China, on the other hand, China is an industrial powerhouse. They make half the steel in the world. They have the world's largest telecommunications manufacturer. China is an industrial powerhouse. What is China's weakness? Oil. And that is China's very, very big weakness, is they have to import their oil, right? And Russia has got a lot of oil, and that's why they're friends with Russia. They buy their oil from Russia. Russia needs to sell oil to somebody, especially with the U.S. sanctions, so they sell it to China. But the reason that China has heavily militarized the South China Sea, and they have a lot of their military forces in the South China Sea, is because oil tankers every day go into the ports of Shanghai. They need that oil to keep coming in. And that's why there's a huge military apparatus there, because if at any point the USA were to try and cut off China's oil supply, China would be in a world of hurt. The lights would go out. I mean, it would be, China is very, 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 very dependent on oil imports. And most of the countries that sell oil to China are U.S. puppets. Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, the United States sells oil to China. But there are two countries that are strong anti-imperialist countries that sell oil to China: Iran and Venezuela. And, if the USA were to go to Saudi Arabia, go to Nigeria and say, cut off, stop selling oil to China, they would do it in a second. But if America went to Iran and said, stop selling oil to China, Iran would say, go screw yourself. And Venezuela is kind of in a situation where they were supplying lots of oil to China, but now they've kind of had their sovereignty taken away and their leader's been kidnapped and they're kind of being held at gunpoint. The strategy it seems, not only is this Israel demanding something that benefits them in the short term, not an overall strategy for American imperialism, it's also a strategy of getting China where Trump wants them by getting control over China's oil supply and using that leverage. They want China to be importing oil almost exclusively from countries that are under the thumb of the United States, who will do what the United States says, so that at any point the USA can cut off China's oil supply and China is weakened. They want to have oil leverage over China, and Iran, Venezuela, and Russia prevent the United States from having oil leverage over China. Why is it that Democrats want to go against Russia so much and are more friendly to China, and Republicans want to go after China so much and are less friendly to Russia? Why? Because who funds the Council on Foreign Relations? ExxonMobil, BP, Shell, Chevron. It's the big oil apparatus, the big oil bankers. HSBC Bank is British Petroleum. Chase Bank is ExxonMobil. Royal Dutch Shell. I mean, you go down the line. The ultra rich are the oil monopolies. The British Empire and Wall Street are oil. It's oil bankers. Meanwhile, who is the military industrial complex in America? Who makes military hardware? Industrialists, manufacturers like General Electric, Apple makes, computer hardware, etc. Russia is a competitor with the oil companies. China is a competitor with the manufacturers, with the people that are involved in computer chips, with the people that are involved in steel manufacturing. And that's the difference. The military industrial complex and manufacturers want to weaken China. The oil companies want to drive Russia off the oil markets. This is, I don't know if you've seen this, but America has literally twisted the arm of Germany and said to Germany, Russia might be right there next to you, but we are going to make you import your natural gas, not from Russia that's right next to you, but from all the way on the other side of the planet. We're going to make you import your natural gas from America. That is ridiculous. And on top of that, Germany built a natural gas pipeline connecting to Russia, right? And what happened? Joe Biden blew it up and destroyed it, right? The oil and gas companies see Russia as a threat to their monopoly, whereas the cell phone companies and the computer chip manufacturers and the steel tycoons, they see China as their competitor. So it seems like Republicans and the military industrial complex see China as their direct competition, whereas the big oil monopolies and the big oil apparatus sees Russia as their major competition. And that seems to be what's going on here. So part of it is they want to get the oil veto over China. They want China to be weak and not able to import oil from Iran or Venezuela, and to be in a position where they have to give America what they want in exchange for not USA not messing with their oil supply. That's part of it. But it's largely that Israel is dictating US foreign policy. And that's what's going on here, right? And that this is the Western imperialist system in its death agony. And that's what's going on. And this is ultimately Israel has seized control of U.S. foreign policy for its own short-term game. And it's not just Israel. It's the Likud wing of Israel that isn't aligned with the military-industrial complex. This is what they want. And it is against the overall strategic interests of American imperialism, and they're overruling it. We now got Joe Kent, resigning and saying so. And this is a crazy situation. And now, more than ever, our message of a government of action that fights for working families, breaking America out of this international financial system. That message, more than ever, that message is what the American people need. We need you to join the Center for Political Innovation. We are stepping up our anti-war activism. We have some very, very important activities planned for the end of this month, right? We are going to be going to the No Kings rallies on March 28th to build anti-war contingents. That's already in the works. In multiple cities, we're doing that. We've got different activities planned. We need your support. We need your support to do it. I made this video, as a special message about how we need your support. So I'm going to put our special message on. And if you can just go to the CPI website and hit the donate button right now, send us $5, $10, $3,000, $300, $50, whatever you can do. That would be appreciated.
Emergency situation.
This war on Iran took us all by surprise, and it's very dangerous. We have some important activities planned, but right now, the Center for Political Innovation really needs you to send a contribution. It's time to get into the streets and stop this war. I hope that you will consider sending us a small gift so that we can stand for peace in the streets of America. We at the Center for Political Innovation, we're doing amazing stuff, absolutely amazing stuff. You know, there was a great meetup today in Minneapolis. Our LA team had a great meetup for City Builders Day. We're always doing great stuff. But I just want to end my opening remarks tonight. I touched on this last night, but some of you may not have been watching last night. So I just want to touch on it again, right? I have never felt so validated in my life. You know, as much as everything happening now is awful, there was a time where when I told people what was going on and why my name has been dragged through the mud and why there's been an absolute war on my reputation, people rolled their eyes and they said, "That's crazy, Caleb. That's crazy." Well, now it is obvious. Who is against us? Who is against the Center for Political Innovation? Who is against me in particular? Who is against me? Well, you saw that picture, right? You saw who killed this guy yesterday? Israel. You know, and did you see that video of me at the State Department asking about, you know, Israeli nuclear weapons? Did you see that video? Did you see that video? Right?
So, Colin Powell, correct? Because it's a nuclear power that has not signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, according to Colin Powell, correct?
Shouldn't you ask Colin Powell that?
Yeah, you saw me confronting U.S. officials about the Israeli nuclear program. Oh, and do you know who this person is? This person, this previous president of Iran, right? That's Ibrahim Raisi, the president of Iran, the previous president, who was also killed and most likely killed by Israel. And also, what is the main newspaper in Israel, like the newspaper of record in Israel? It's called Haaretz. If you go to the Haaretz website, you will find an article published in March of 2019 that has multiple paragraphs about yours truly and how I am an anti-Semite and a Nazi and a white supremacist. And that article was written by Alex Reed Ross, a member of Democratic Socialists of America, a DSA member, a member of Mamdani's organization and AOC's organization, who was outed by Gray Zone as being a U.S. intelligence operative, works with the Department of Homeland Security and their Network Contagion Institute, right? Mossad is at war with me. And why are they at war with me? They're at war with me because I went to conferences in Iran and spoke about, the opposing Israel. They're out to get me because I went on an Iranian ship and risked my life bringing medical aid or trying to bring medical aid to Yemen. They're out to get me because I've sat down with a president of Iran. They're out to get me because I've sat down with an Iranian leader that they really wanted to kill. They're out to get me because I went to Iran in 2015 and made a whole documentary about trying to meet the supreme leader and what it was like to be in the presence of the supreme leader. Yeah, folks, Mossad is out to get me. Mossad is absolutely out to get me, and they have been for a long time. And if you repeat the defamations that have been pushed against me, if you call me a white supremacist, if you call me a neo-Nazi, if you call me all the various things that I've been called, you are helping the Mossad. There is a clear Mossad operation against me, right? It's not simply the FBI, it is Mossad, right? Because I have been an advocate of friendship with Iran, because I have sat down with Iranian leaders, because I have made documentary films that are shown on Iranian TV, because I risked my life trying to help the people of Yemen. I am a target of Mossad, right? And Mossad has infiltrated the American socialist groups. Again, who was it who smeared me in the Zionist daily newspaper Haaretz? A member of DSA, a DSA Trotskyite, defamed me in the daily newspaper of Haaretz, right? There is a Mossad operation against me. And the Mossad operation started in 2015, and it escalated with the Haaretz piece and all of that. And it continued in 2022. And one of the main people who has been involved in that operation is somebody who claims to agree with me, and pretends to agree with me, who just kind of came out of nowhere in like 2020 and suddenly was agreeing with me, but was being boosted by all the mainstream media and was literally boosted by the Israeli government. I kid you not. The Israeli government has tweeted this person out multiple times as the chosen face of their opposition. They tweeted an April Fool's joke about him at one point. That's how much the Israeli government was trying to promote him. And that individual launched a campaign. He pretended to be friendly to CPI, and then he launched a campaign, a well-orchestrated defamation campaign against me in 2022. So, Mossad is responsible for the campaign against me, right? And the fact that whenever I go to leftist rallies, I get all these people, oh my God, you're a Nazi, you're a white supremacist. No, you're believing Mossad propaganda, right? And the communist groups are controlled by Mossad. And if you want any proof that the communist groups are controlled by Mossad, I didn't know if I was going to do this, right? Let me show you this article. And I'm only mentioning this. I actually saw some Trotskyite in the chat was saying this also. There was literally an article that, let me show you this, right? This shows you how blatant, right? This is an article. One of the communist groups that exists published this piece on their website. I am sharing it. I have no problem with you reading this article. This is an article dated March 7th, 2026 from Struggle La Lucha, a Marxiste organization. This is the headline. Israel didn't drag Washington to war. Washington sent Israel. Are you kidding me? Israel is the innocent victim. And I heard this. And after I went to the conference in Iran in 2015, I came back to the United States, and immediately there was a campaign against me in the Workers' World Party, which I was in. And people in the Workers' World Party broke away to form Struggle La Lucha, and they told me the same shit. They told me that the people in Israel, they're innocent victims. They didn't want to go to Israel, Caleb. They didn't even know where they were going. They just left the concentration camps to Israel. And they told me I was anti-Semitic, even though they're anti-Israel. They told me that if a white person is anti-immigrant or a white person is anti-gay, they're an evil racist. But when Jews want to kill all the Arabs, when Jewish folks say kill all the Arabs or Islam should be outlawed, that's just so sad. There is crypto-Zionism. And this group, this is a crypto-Zionist article. It might say it's against Israel, but it's saying that Israel isn't responsible for this war. Unbelievable, right? That Israel is somehow not responsible for this war, that it's all evil America. It's not Israel, Caleb. No good Jewish person would ever want to have this war. This war is started by white dudes in pickup trucks in Ohio. That's what this article is saying. It is pure hate for the American people. There is no way you can objectively look at the facts and not think that Israel dragged America into this. But it just couldn't be, because everybody knows that American working people are all in the Ku Klux Klan, and they're all white supremacists, and they're all bad people. And, good Jewish folks are smart, and sure, maybe they're Zionists, and sure, maybe they're anti-Islamic, but they would never do this. This has to be the job of average working class white Americans. They're the ones that did this, right? And that is how these fucking Marxistes think. This is how these piece of trash Trotskyites think. Right? As far as they are concerned, right? I was told by Sarah Flounders, a boss of the Workers' World Party, that everyone in Ohio thinks that Jews are born with horns and tails. I grew up in Ohio. I lived in Ohio until I was 23 years old. I have never met anyone in my goddamn life who thinks that Jews are born with horns and tails. But I have met many, many Zionists who believe that all white people think that. If you go to Kentucky or Alabama, all they do is sit around and talk about, I'm going to kill me a Jew. I'm going to kill me a Jew. I'm in the Ku Klux Klan. They don't realize that at evangelical churches, they have Israeli flags in the window and they pray for Israel like crazy. They don't even know this. These people are crypto-Zionists, and they might tell you that they're against Israel. They might tell you they're against Israel, but they have the gall to not only accuse anyone who really stands up to Israel and really stands with Iran like I did, really stands with the people of Yemen like I did of being an anti-Semite, but on top of that, they have the gall to publish this screed saying it's not Israel's fault. Israel didn't want the war. Oh, no, Israel would never do this. No, Jews are smarter than them. This war must have been created by dumb Gentiles. Dumb Gentiles did it, Those racist guys in Alabama who voted for Trump, they're the only ones that would want this war. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. You have to be such a fucking racist to believe Israel didn't push America to do this. And that's what they are. Zionism is racism, folks. It is Jewish supremacism. Zionism is the idea that Jews are so special and so magical and so superior that they can never fit in European civilization, that they have to have their own country to get away from the evil Gentiles. And I got to tell you, a lot of communists are Zionists, and they might tell you they're against Israel, but they buy into what Vladimir Lenin himself, who was also Jewish, Lenin said that there is something called the spirit of the ghetto. And that is what these people believe, the spirit of the ghetto. And the reason Marxism and communism in America is never going to take off as a movement is because it is infected with the spirit of the ghetto. The belief that they hate the American people. They hate the American people. They hate Christians. They hate guns. They hate Bibles. They hate flags. They don't hate American imperialism. They don't hate Wall Street. They don't hate finance capital. They hate the American people. And this has to be called out. In my book, Trotsky and the Neocons, which is a widely selling text, I mean, it's very popular, gets into this issue, right? And that there are Mossad agents all over the communist organizations that have been planted there to make sure that they frame the discourse in a certain way. And that is why you would think that these communist groups would be the ultimate populists, right? When the financial crisis happened, they would mobilize the working people to go out and fight for their economic rights, but they're not. They're not populists. They think all populism is Nazi. All populism is white supremacism because they hate the American people. They're not fighting for the American working class. They are celebrating their opposition to the American working class. They think Americans are evil, racists, and we have to be real about this, right? And this is crypto-Zionism, and it is the spirit of the ghetto. And the reason that I realized I would never be allowed to really be a leader of American communism because I don't think this way, and it's weird. I very much was alienated from the culture I grew up in. There was a time when I first got involved in communist politics, I couldn't even go to church, right? When we would have to go to church services because of some of our involvement in the Black community, I would sit there and I was just so angry because of the trauma growing up and my anger at my parents and the small town I grew up in. I was an atheist. I didn't think of myself as a Christian, but in that group, they always looked at me. He's one of them. He's one of them. He's not one of us. That's how they always saw it. And these people were very anti-Israel. These people were very, very anti-Israel. It didn't matter. I was still not, I don't know. I was still not one of them. Let me put it that way, right? These people are bigots. These people are bigots. And Trotsky was like this. And that's why Trotsky hated the Russian peasantry, right? And this is my book, Trotsky and the Neocons. I talk about this. Leon Trotsky, right? Leon Trotsky, he was born in Kherson and he was persecuted in the pogroms. And there was a lot of anti-Semitism in Russia. And when Lenin came forward and said, we want to form a revolutionary dictatorship of the workers and the peasants, Trotsky said, no. Peasants are inherently backward. I never want to have any alliance with the peasants. And he refused to embrace the demand for land redistribution. He didn't want peasants to have land. He said peasants are an inherently backward class. They just want to be capitalists. They just want to have their own property, right? And then after the Russian Revolution, Trotsky wanted to draft all the Russian people into the military and march communism into the rest of Europe. Permanent revolution. And Stalin came along, and Stalin said, well, no, we're not going to have permanent revolution. We're going to have socialism in one country. And Trotsky, do you know what he called Stalin? Do you know what he called Stalin? This sounds too insane to be true. It sounds too insane to be true. But I have the proof right here. I have the proof right here. If any one of these dumb woke leftists wants to tell you how great Trotsky is, you point them towards this book published by Leon Trotsky in 1939. And you know, they say, I'm against racism. That's why I'm a Trotskyist. Say, have you ever read a book that Trotsky wrote called Stalin? It's Stalin, an appraisal of the man and his influence by Leon Trotsky. Go to page 1, not page 12, not page 3, page 1. Page 1 of this book, of chapter 1, page 1 of chapter 1, Family and School, begins. The late Leonid Crossan, the old revolutionist and engineer and diplomat, above all, intelligent human being, was the first to call Stalin Asiatic. You read the first 3 paragraphs of this biography of Stalin that Trotsky wrote, and you tell me this isn't racism. Stalin, because he was born in Georgia, which is close to Asia. It's not a nice white European country. Stalin was a Mongol. I'll read to you from here, right? The Georgians, in contradiction from the Mongolian Azerbaijanis, belonged to the so-called Mediterranean European race. Thus, Stalin was not exact in calling himself Asiatic, but geography and ethnography and anthropology are not all that matters. The human flood that has poured for centuries from Asia into Europe have clung to the valleys and mountains of the Caucasus. Disconnected tribes, blah-blah-blah-blah-blah, blah-blah-blah. Georgians preserved and comparatively pure their ethnic physiography. The first pages of this book, they follow the Caucasus of Genghis Khan. Stalin is an Asiatic. Stalin is Genghis Khan. This book basically says that the reason Stalin is not a good Western Marxist promoting permanent revolution is because Stalin's Asian. He's not white. And Stalin was Georgian. They tend to be, they're Caucasian from the Caucasus, but Stalin was white. But Trotsky decides that in order to justify his hatred for Stalin, he spends the first couple pages of the book arguing that Stalin is not white, he's Asian. Stalin is a Mongoloid. Stalin is Genghis Khan. He calls Stalin Genghis Khan. That's called racism, folks. But there's a certain group of people that are allowed to be racist, right? And you know it, right? You know it. And I know it. I used to work at an insurance company here in New York. When I first moved to New York, I worked at an insurance company. And I walked into the insurance company. It was nice because we had a lot of holidays off, holidays I'd never heard of, right? We had the Sukkot, right? The Sukkot, it was like the autumn festival. And on Fridays, we got out of work early because of the Shabbos, right? We got out of work at like 3:30 to make sure we had enough time before sundown. And, and honestly, one thing, it wasn't a bad place to work. I don't hate the people I worked with, but one thing that shocked me, I had been there for a week and I had walked in and it was a Hasidic Jewish, company, very, very pro-Israel, very Zionist. And one of my coworkers said, where do you like to go to the beach? Where do you like to go to the beach? And I said, I like to go to Rockaway Beach. And she said, oh, I don't like to go there. There's too many blacks and there's too many Hispanics there. I was like, excuse me? And I heard comments like that all the time. And it's funny, I'm from Ohio, where we're all supposed to be in the Klan, right? Where we're all supposed to be chewing tobacco. I don't like other race. I never heard people talk that blatantly. All the years I was in school, I heard people deny that police brutality exists. I heard people say that black people commit crimes at higher rates and stuff. I never heard anyone just say, I don't want my kids to be around other races. Never heard that openly. Right in the middle of the office. I'd been there for a week. And this Hasidic Jewish woman says, oh, I don't want to go there. There's too many blacks and Hispanics there. And what else? What else happened? I'd been there about a month. And this woman, she was saying, my kid really wants to go see the Transformers movie. but the only movie theater showing it is next to a mosque. And my kid doesn't want to go there. He doesn't want to go to a movie theater next to a mosque because he thinks he'll be blown up. And honestly, this, I kind of feel sorry for the poor kid. I really do. But her child went to a Jewish school, and at Jewish school, her child has seen loads and loads of movies of suicide bombings and all of this. And her kid was so traumatized by the hate porn they pump into these kids' heads every day at his yeshiva that he was literally afraid to go to a movie theater in Brooklyn because it was near a mosque, because they had shown him so much gory hate porn. That's child abuse, right? If you're raising your children to believe that anyone of another religion wants to murder them, that's child abuse, right? And that's what they do at these yeshivas. They show these kids Holocaust movies all day long. They show them movies about Arab murderers and terrorists and arms and legs, and they traumatize their kids. And what are they pounding into their heads? Everyone else wants to kill you. Everyone's out to get you because you're just so much better than everyone else. You're the chosen one. You're superior. And that's why it's okay for us to murder Palestinians, because they're an inferior race. And that's why it's okay for us to lie and trick America into a war, because we're just so much better than everybody else. And if you traumatize people and you show people films and movies and convince them that everyone's out to get them, yeah, they will do bad things generally. If you create that kind of siege mindset, they abuse their children and they brainwash their children to be hateful bigots. One of my coworkers told me every religion except for Judaism was invented as an excuse to kill Jews. That's what he told me. And I mean, his family had fled from Romania, right, in like the 19-teens when there were anti-Jewish riots. And he said, yeah, every religion except for Judaism is just an excuse to kill Jews. And I thought that's so wrong, and I'm not saying that's not the result of a whole lot of persecution, but that is an evil mindset, right? And again, imagine that there was a school for white European kids and they showed them nothing but movies of black people robbing white people or black people blowing up white people, and they told them, oh, you're so special because you're white, and that's why it's okay for white people to lynch black people. Of course, everyone would say that's an unbelievably racist school. That's not allowed. And they would be right? But I guess it's okay for them to brainwash their kids to believe that every race except for every race and every nationality except for Jews is out to get them and kill them. And that's why they're at war with the rest of the world. And that's why it's okay for Israel to violate human rights. And that's why it's okay to lie and to deceive, right? This is the spirit of the ghetto. And Zionism is the ultimate expression of it. But the communist groups in America are infected with it. And when I, as a non-Jew, as a Christian, when I rediscovered my Christian faith in Iran, or on an Iranian ship headed for Yemen, I reconnected with God. And when I stood with the Iranian people, the Mossad agents in the communist groups, they declared war on me. And they worked very, very hard to destroy my reputation. And this story must be told, because right now, everyone sees the evils that Israel is doing. Everyone sees what Israel is doing. Everyone can see all the horrific, evil things that Israel is doing. And so the notion that anyone wants to repeat the same shit I've been hearing, you're a Nazi, you're a white supremacist. If anyone wants to repeat that, you're repeating Mossad propaganda. You're repeating stuff that was directed. They announced their campaign against me in Haaretz, and you are repeating Mossad propaganda. Right. So if anyone ever tells you, oh, don't listen to Caleb, he's a bad person, he's a neo-Nazi, he's a white. No, I'm not. I don't believe in racial supremacism. And I got to tell you, look, when the Uhuru movement, the African People's Socialist Party, was targeted by the FBI raided the homes of a black socialist group. You'll notice none of these communists did anything to support them. Right. I went to their court date in Florida. I didn't see anybody from the PSL. I didn't see anybody from the Communist Party USA. Some of these groups published articles on their websites. They didn't do anything to support them, right? Freedom Road Socialist Organization, with their committed to stop FBI repression, they did something. Other than that, I didn't see any of the communist groups. One of their own, a black communist leader named Chairman O'Malley, was facing 15 years in prison under the same law they're now going to use against Tucker Carlson. I don't know if you saw that. And Tucker Carlson supported him and defended him. And Glenn Beck even did segments on his radio show supporting them. But None of the communist groups did anything to support Uhuru. Why? Well, because Chairman O'Malley, I learned the history of their organization. Chairman O'Malley was a leader of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC. And what happened? SNCC was getting Zionist money. And Chairman O'Malley studied anti-imperialism and anti-colonialism, and Chairman O'Malley supported the Palestinians. And there was a split in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee because a lot of their leaders, like John Lewis, wanted that Zionist money to fund the civil rights movement, and they wouldn't do it. And Chairman O'Malley started his movement. The African People's Socialist Party started as a breakaway from the civil rights movement because the civil rights movement was dependent on Zionist money. And they have a big picture in their office of Marcus Garvey. And who was Marcus Garvey? Marcus Garvey was the leader of the Black Back to Africa movement. And when Marcus Garvey was sent to prison, in his speech, he said this was the work of the Zionists. And the NAACP supported the prosecution of Marcus Garvey. And who was funding the NAACP? The Zionists. And when Marcus Garvey was sent to federal prison, you read what he said. He said, this is the Zionists. It's because I will not make the Black liberation struggle their political tool, right? He said the NAACP depends on Zionist money, and I won't make the Black liberation struggle a wing of Zionism. And that's why they're throwing me in jail. And at the Uhuru office, they have big pictures of Marcus Garvey, and they call themselves modern day Garveyites and inheritors of Marcus Garvey. And so when the FBI came for them, all of these crypto Zionists didn't do anything to support them. And we did. We supported a Black liberation organization that has a very different perspective than we do. I mean, we're both socialists. I guess we're innovationists. We have our own thing, but we're anti-colonial, anti-imperialist, but we have a different view of the race question in America. But these communist groups are controlled by Mossad, folks. They are controlled by Mossad, and they are infected with the spirit of the ghetto, with anti-populism. And because of that, they left the African People's Socialist Party out to dry. We did not. So anyone who tries to tell you we're white nationalists and all that, ask yourself, why did we support Uhuru and these jokers didn't? We're not white nationalists. They're crypto Zionists, right? CPI has people of all different races and nationalities in it, right? And that's not intentional, by the way. We're not going around trying to tokenize people. It's just kind of how it developed. Right? That's just kind of how it developed, right? And that's fine. And that's how it should be, right? I am for a multiracial organization, but we don't pander, right? We're not going around saying, all right, do we have a Black? Do we have an Asian? No, we don't do that. We don't do that, right? People join us and get involved. And it just so happens we have a multiracial organization because our message appeals to people of many different backgrounds. And that's how it should be. But these groups tokenize people. They are run by wealthy people of a certain ethnic group. And they then go around, all right, we need to have a Black to put at the front of the room. And then we need to have a Hispanic to put at the front of the room. And I guess maybe we can have an Asian, but Asians are right wing. I don't know if we should have an Asian or not. Unbelievable, right? One of a guy who's done stuff with us in the past, we don't agree with everything about him, but he got canceled by these people because he dared point out that in New York City, there were hate crimes going on against Asian people. There was a wave of ugly hate crimes against Asian Americans, and the perpetrators of it were African American, right? It was just an ugly thing that was going on for a while. After COVID, on the subways, there was an ugly spat of Black Americans beating up Asians and attacking Asians on the subway. It was awful. And God forbid, he said it tends to be African American folks that are doing this. And that was a fact. Right? He wasn't saying African Americans are evil. All he did was point that out. And all of the Trotskyite organizations and all of these communist groups canceled him for saying that. You're not allowed to say that, apparently, right? For just saying that African Americans were the ones targeting my people. For just saying that, he got canceled, right? And even though Asian Americans, it's about 50-50, right? Asian Americans in America, about half Republican, half Democrat, right? It's about 50-50, right? Regardless, because he said that, these groups canceled and smeared him. Because they think Asians are right wing, and it's unbelievable, right? And these groups are particularly crazy, but we in CPI, we don't pander. I mean, we are for a multiracial organization, and we will work with anybody, but we're not tokenizing people. And these people they are tokenizing people. They don't really care. And I could rant against these groups all the time, but I'm just telling you that the reason CPI has been the target, I didn't even realize to what extent this was true myself, right? For a long time, I just thought I just don't fit in with them, or this is jealousy or whatever. It took me a long time to realize that this is just a Mossad operation. The fact that when you Google me, a bunch of gross sexual stuff that's like wild exaggerations comes up, and it won't change no matter what, that is a Mossad operation. That is a Mossad operation. And the fact that when that wasn't working, they found somebody who sounded like me, some pretty boy rich kid from California that sounds like me, and they had the Israeli government Twitter accounts tweet him out and boost him, and they had the New York Times promote him with articles just to take people's attention from me. Yeah, this is a Mossad operation, folks. This is a Mossad operation. And we just have to call it what it is. And if you're going along with it and you're supporting it, you are working with Mossad, right? They want to not only control dissident spaces, but they also want to control their opposition. And that is what is going on, right? We need to just talk about this. And that article from Struggle La Lucha that says Israel never wanted this war. It's just the evil American Trump supporters that want this war. When Trump supporters, folks, this is just classic, right? Obama said no new wars, and he bombed and destroyed Libya, and it was horrendous. And I was angry about how the communist groups didn't do anything about it. And Trump said no new wars, and look what he's done with Iran, right? And both of them lied and sold out their people. But when Obama bombed and destroyed Libya, how many Obama administration officials resigned in protest? 0. When Obama bombed and destroyed Libya, what did Rachel Maddow do? She supported it. What did MSNBC do? They supported it, right? They all supported it. But Trump betrayed his base and is bombing Iran, started a war with Iran. And Tucker Carlson, who was on the campaign, spoke at every rally. He was there at Madison Square Garden. He was at every rally supporting Trump. Not only is he against it, now Trump is trying to throw him in jail. He's launched a FARA investigation to throw him in jail. And on top of that, Joe Kent, a member of the Trump's counterterrorism director, resigned in protest of it. Right? It tells me that there's a lot more anti-war people on the right, even though, yes, they're being sold out, but the left did nothing when Obama sold out. The anti-war movement pretty much liquidated and dissolved. Right. I watched it happen. Right. There had been a huge anti-war movement under Bush. And as soon as Obama got in there, it went down to nothing. Whereas it looks like, the dissident MAGA, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, the Thomas Masseys, they represent a very big layer of the Trump base that is not going anywhere. And that tells me that the left had this attitude that it's fine to pander to Obama supporters, but you can never pander to Trump supporters. You can never talk to them. Anyone who supports Trump is an evil. Hitler is a Nazi. Well, they're wrong, right? They're wrong. And that's because they're Zionists. They're crypto Zionists. But anyway, I could rant about all of this all night. So why don't we do the roll call, and then I'll start answering people's questions. If you want to send a question for the second half of the show, I would urge you to send a Rumble rant, but the best way to do it is go to buymeacoffee.com and send your questions. Go to buymeacoffee.com, Caleb Maupin 22 on Cash App, but buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin is the best way to send it. All right. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who's with us? Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? We got George Muniz in Sydney. Good to see you. Who's with us? Auckland, New Zealand. Kikiwi Corner. Names and locations. Anybody else? Ryan in Kansas City. Good to see you. Dan in LA. Good to see you. Justin in Salt Lake City. Good to see you. John in Florida. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. Good to see you. Names Ali from Ottawa, Escambia County, Florida, right? Who else? Florida, Jose, California, Anthony in Detroit. Good to see you. 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 Gabby in Chicago. As always, Gabby, you are awesome. Tim in St. Louis. Good to see you, Tim. You are an awesome, beloved member of our community. Join CPI, folks. It's not enough to just watch this. This isn't meant to be entertainment. I'm not trying to win the internet, right? Like certain people. I'm trying to build an organization. Join CPI. Get involved. We need you to join our organization. We have a lot of work to do. We need a movement. There's no way around it. We've got to build a movement. We have got to build a movement. That is what it's all about with me. The only reason I ever got interested in this stuff is because I want to build a movement. This is not meant to be intellectual entertainment, stimulation, a podcast. No, this is about building a movement, and we're doing it. I want to show you these pictures, right? So March 15th, the Ides of March, is the day when Julius Caesar was killed. And that's an important part of our kind of understanding. We are city builders. This is our textbook. We were talking about the assassination of Julius Caesar. So in 2 cities where we have a base, our members had celebrations. So this is, LA, out in LA, Dan and Ishmael and all of them, they set up at a college at UCLA, and they had kind of a meetup, and a city builders day meetup to educate people about Julius Caesar. And there's Ishmael 2070th anniversary of the death of Julius Caesar, the Ides of March, no war with Iran. And they set up at the campus and they did outreach. It was really, really beautiful. It was really, really great what they did. And then today in Minneapolis, they did the same thing. They had another a meetup, and they gave speeches about the Belt and Road Initiative. They gave speeches about the fall of Rome. It was a really, really great thing that they did. This is the Minneapolis meetup that they had today. It's great. This is, again, we are building a real community. We're trying to get you involved. And at the end of the month, we're doing some wild things in different places. I mean, we got some very exciting activities that we are building up for at the end of the month. We're building a real movement, right? I am not interested in building a podcast. I'm interested in building a real movement. And our members are amazing. We were out in the streets on February 28th in 8 different cities rallying in opposition to the murder of the supreme leader. And we were, the day Maduro was taken, within hours, we had people in the streets of various cities protesting it. And, we are about to launch a new outreach campaign, which is very exciting. I just put an order in and with the printer, and all kinds of great stuff is happening. We're building a real movement. We're building a real movement. No one's going to do it but us. We have to do it ourselves. We can't wait for one of these jokers to do it. People, the reason I talk about these other groups so much is because we have a lot of people that continue to say, oh, why don't you join one of these other groups? Why don't you join the PSL? Why don't you join the XYZ or the QWH or the NBC or the BBC or no, these groups suck. No one's doing it but us. We're doing it. We're doing it. We're doing it. All right, folks. Well, listen, all right. So listen, I am going to answer 2 people sent buy me a coffees, right? Before the show started, and I'm going to answer them. So Jacob said, thanks for playing my clip yesterday. I'm relatively new to communism, still exploring my options politically. I try to use my right-wing background and vocabulary to plant seeds of left-wing ideology to my peers. 2 days after that Fishback rally, I went to one university, West Florida, and used an opportunity of repealing gun control laws, rearming the working class. What are your thoughts? Link to the clip below. Well, we're past this. I will just say, Jacob, I appreciate you, and I'm going to show your clip. But at the same time, we're not doing communism. We've entered a new stage. We're innovationists, right? I thought for a long time, if we just, we could be the real communists and all of that. That's just not where things are at. And, it took us a long time to do that. We're not trying to rebrand. We have a new thesis, right? We're about growth, right? And that capitalism, because of the tendency of the falling rate of profit and overproduction, capitalism needs degrowth. So what we need is a strong state that can break the power of the big monopolies and have economic growth, right? And that's really what we need. And if you start talking about communism, people think it's about making everyone equal, or it's about the workers against the bosses. And that's not going to work in the age of modern technology as we move toward a gig economy where everyone's a small business owner. I would urge you to go read our book, What is Innovationism, which is for free on our website. Go to our website, click on Works, and the pamphlet that comes up is called What is Innovationism? And you can read it for free. You can get the PDF. on our website. Read what we wrote. We explained we have a distinct viewpoint that if we continue to call ourselves communists, that associates us with certain problematic views, and it just prevents us from doing what needs to be done. Go read What is Innovationism, and you'll understand why it is that we're building a movement that captures the essence of what people were fighting for all over the world in the 20th century. And they broke out of imperialism and built up their countries with 5-year plans. But it has broken with some of the baggage that holds Marxism back. And I would just encourage you to read about innovationism. We have to do something new if we're going to get this done. I have spent my entire adult life, I'm 38 years old. From the time I was like 12 years old, I was looking at communist groups in America. I was briefly around a Maoist group for about 2 years. And then I joined the Workers' World Party. I was a member of the Workers' World Party for 8 years. I've studied all these groups. We have to do something new. And that's not obvious. You have to see it. But, Gabby had the same experience. You can talk to our member, Gabby. She was in the PSL for a while and she understood it. You can't, if you just try to do the communism thing, you're going to get nowhere. And that's a tough pill to swallow, but it's true. And that there's a reason Americans don't want to join those groups. And I've noticed since we have changed our outreach approach, we have actually recruited much more effectively. But here's your video. I'm going to put it on. Thank you.
So I've gotten the impression that you're kind of a Second Amendment fundamentalist, and I kind of want to put that through the crucible. So in 1986, Ronald Reagan passed federal legislation, specifically the Hughes Amendment, that made it illegal to buy and sell fully automatic weapons. As the Florida governor, would you work with the state attorney general to bring a case to the federal district courts to challenge the Hughes Amendment and restore validity of true Second Amendment rights?
This will be a very long, drawn-out answer, so could you just bear with me? Yes.
Yeah. And then he has the quote there on the screen of Karl Marx against opposing gun control, which is true. And, there's a whole history, and that's a whole nother conversation we can have. But, thank you, Jacob. And I hope you read What is Innovationism, and I hope you join the Center for Political Innovation. But yeah, we just, and it's interesting because I grew up in a small town. No one in my family was in the Communist Party. I didn't have any communist relatives. And I discovered I had to seek these groups out, right? And most people nowadays, young people who get into communism, are like me, right? They go and find it on their own. The young people that grew up around this know it's a dead end. But for people like you and me that grew up in conservative areas, we never encountered any of these communist groups. We never saw them. And so for us, it's like a whole new world. And for me, it was a whole new world. And I became obsessed with the different groups and the history and all that. And it took me a long time to realize they weren't going anywhere. And I believe if you are a sincere person, you will also come to that conclusion. And you may not come to that conclusion now, and I respect that. But I'm just telling you, the communist groups are a dead end. They're a dead end. And part of it is just because the American government goes all over the world preventing communist groups from coming to power. And so in America, all the communist groups are, they're just, it's like the FBI is like scrambling to control them. And that's a whole nother story. The next question we got is, zooming in on each topic over the next days, are there any shows you would like to be invited on? Some goals would be Jimmy Dore. I've been on Jimmy Dore 3 times already, just FYI, just throwing it out there. I've been on Jimmy Dore's show 3 times. You can look. I was on there about my book, Bread Tube Serves Imperialism. I was on there about my Kamala Harris book, and I've been on since to talk to him, about Russia and stuff like that. I have been on Jimmy Dore's show before. I'm suppressed in the search engine, so you might not know that. But if you go to my YouTube channel and you search Jimmy Dore, you'll find multiple appearances. I was on Jimmy Dore's show to talk about the Bread Tube book. I was on Jimmy Dore's show to talk about my Kamala Harris book. And I was back on the Jimmy Dore show when Keaton Weiss was guest hosting for him to talk about Iran and Venezuela. That was in January, actually. I went on that show. So I have been on Jimmy Dore. Tucker Carlson knows I exist. He name dropped my book, Who Are the Houthis and What Are They Fighting For? And he knows I exist. And I am convinced I will be on Tucker's show at some point. But I don't know when that will be, but it will happen. People have suggested we do some kind of campaign and write letters to Tucker Carlson, and I'm all for that. One of our members, Mike, actually wrote kind of a guide to how to send an email to Tucker urging him to have me on. That's fine if you want to do that. But we also, at the end of the day, there is no get rich quick scheme. right? Me going on Tucker is not going to change things all that much. The audience will improve, will expand, we'll get access to new people, and that's good. At the end of the day, there's nothing short of organizing that's going to change things. We have to just go out and recruit people who would never go looking for this, right? There's no get rich quick scheme in the podcasts, right? A lot of people who watch podcasts, it's just a form of entertainment. It's like watching a TV show. And they watch a show for a couple of years and then they change the channel. I don't want to recruit you to watch a TV show. I want you to join our group, make friends in our group, learn the joy that I learned of doing outreach and being involved in projects and community work and build connections and build a lifestyle as a revolutionary. That's what I want you to do. And it's not for everybody. It is not for everybody. Right? Not everyone is capable of doing it. And I recognize that. But there are some people that are capable of doing it. And that's who I want to win over. Right? And Jesus said, straight is the gate and narrow is the way. And, not everyone is capable necessarily or ready necessarily of doing it. But if you are one who is meant to be part of the vanguard, if you are one for whom this is the mission that you will be sent out to do, I believe we will find you by showing that we can build an organization and doing the real work. We won't find you by intellectually stimulating you. We might find some people, but at the end of the day, the people in our organization who are, taking on leadership roles are people that joined us because they have been in organizations before and they know what it means to be part of an organization and they appreciate that we have an organization. I think about some of our more active members. They understand what it's like to be in an illiberal movement. And so that's important. And that, that it's just, I've come to understand that, there's no get rich quick scheme. There's no, it's not like one day we're going to get on a show and then it'll all be, no, it's not going to work that way. And the other thing that people have noticed is Tucker Carlson has a huge audience, but there are people there's a guy who did interviews with him about World War II history. His YouTube channel's tiny, and he's been on Tucker. Tucker did a whole multi-hour interview with him. And his channel's still tiny because the internet is way more rigged. And I really am glad the guy from the Counterterrorism said that the internet's about 25% real. That's what I've been suspecting. The internet used to be a lot more real than it is now. The internet was always rigged a little bit, but the internet is now more rigged than it has ever been. It is a joke, right? It is so rigged. We have to just build our organization. If people find us through the internet, great. But my goal, I want everyone watching to join CPI. That's what I want. I want you to, if you agree with what we're saying here, I want you to join the organization. And I don't have any delusion that this channel is going to blow up to hundreds of thousands of subscribers. I mean, it'd be great if it did, but it doesn't really matter. I want you to join CPI. So there you go. That's what I want. And then the rest of your question, you said, go on Tucker and Jimmy Dore. I would happy to do it. I've done Jimmy Dore 3 times. I could do Tucker again. A lot of frivolous divides are about to fall away. I hope you're right. I'm happy to do super chats to the show recommending you. Okay, great. Well, thanks. And thank you for recommending us. You also asked about 2 individuals. Those individuals were friendly to us at one point, and then they became ridiculously hostile. And I mean, unbelievably hostile. I believe anyway, I have a very negative opinion, and we try to avoid any discussion of them. Generally, if people bring them up in the chat, I just try to remove them immediately because it's a trolling game they play. They come in, what do you think of this? It's this game, and they want me to rant and rave against them every night. And sometimes I do that, but I shouldn't. We tried to get along with those people and with that organization. And it's not a real organization. It's an internet fan club. But we tried to get along with them when they started, and they were nothing but hostile. And if you have any question about whether or not they are sincere, and these people claim to support Russia like we do. They claim to support all the countries that we support. But you'll notice when Uhuru was indicted by the federal government, they didn't do anything for Uhuru. Nothing. I went to the trial for Uhuru. They were never there. They never did anything for Uhuru. And one of their members told me that they never did anything for Uhuru because they're competition, right? And because he doesn't like them, and that's pretty blatant. And they even attacked CPI for supporting Uhuru at one point. This is a black socialist group that's being charged with being agents of Russia for their speech. Not only did they not do anything for them, which is like, why are you not concerned about that? You know, you've got members living in Russia and all that, but it just doesn't concern you that this organization is basically being criminalized for saying the same things that you guys say, but it just doesn't concern you for some reason. That's interesting. That's a little suspicious. But on top of that, then they attacked us for supporting them, right? And that there, right there, tells you that something's going on, something's not right. And I will tell you, right, the endless amount, you know, all kinds of stupid internet drama goes on with them. And they are desperate to rope us into their internet drama. I got an email yesterday. I don't know if the person who sent it was sincere or not. I just don't know who they are. Somebody sent me an email last night about some internet drama. And I replied to them and I said, you know, we're not involved with this group and we're not involved with this other person who's fighting with this group. We have nothing to do with this. But they really want, every time anything, they fight with anybody, they try to find some way to get me involved in it, because that's why they exist. And that's why, you know, I mean, that's part of why we don't want to do the communism thing, right? Communism in America is owned by woke, toxic people at this point. Communism as an ideology, dialectical materialism, atheism, it has some problems, okay? And that some of the problems of the so-called left, you have to admit that they flow from communism, and that the anti-imperialist countries have largely strayed from some of the more toxic aspects of the original left communist ideology. And that's what I've written about. You can read my book, Mystical Stalinism, and all of that. So we realize there are big differences between what, you know, Marx wrote and what we do. And we're fine with that. That's good. And I think socialist, you know, China, you know, Vietnam and other anti-imperialist countries are also different from what Marx wrote. And that's good. I embrace that. But the other thing is, when these people did this, it was really obvious what they were doing. They wanted to own communism. Good. Take it. It's yours. Have fun with it. All right. We realized a long time ago that communism in America is a dead end. When they decided that they were going to use the internet and the algorithms to own communism, I said, let them have it. And that pissed them off like crazy. And I thought that was interesting, right? Wouldn't they be happy about that? Right? We're not competing with them. Why are you not? Why are you mad that we're no longer trying to compete with you? Isn't that interesting? Right? You know, if they don't want us to work with them, they hate us. And then as soon as we decided to stop using the label that they're using and just let them have that label, because the internet is rigged to boost them, the Israeli government tweets one of their people out. We just said, you know what, fine. You're right. For a long time, we've realized that doing the communism thing is not going to work. We started to do our own thing. And then they got so angry. No. And they got so angry. All these tweets. Oh, he can't do that. Yeah. Interesting. Isn't that interesting? Wouldn't they be happy? They don't want to work with us, and we're no longer using the same label, so we're not competing with them. Why are they not happy about it? That seems to make me think maybe they were set up to try and weaken our influence. And maybe that's like their job, is to harm us and to pull people away from us. Because, you know, if I had a flower shop, right, and there was another flower shop across the street and it closed, I would be happy, because then everyone would shop at my flower shop. I'd be like, great. Now all the people that were going to buy flowers from them will buy it from me. I would be happy about it. But, you know, if the only reason my flower shop existed was because somebody who hated that other flower shop was subsidizing them and giving them money and propping them up, and then they closed down, I'd be pissed, because I would know the money was going to be cut off. Anyway, enough about that. I've already talked about this way too long. Anyway, next question. So Gabby sent a question. What did Gabby say? Gabby says, Marx's ideas about workers organizing still matter, but today's reality feels more complex than just workers versus bosses. Power is spread across corporations, governments, and institutions, and in new modern ways. So what does it actually look like for workers to stand up and fight back in modern times? Well, here's the thing. Marx himself, you know, Marx was a very smart individual, and he wrote this, right? He wrote this, right? And I'll find you the quote. He did write this particular passage. If I can find the quote, right? Where is it? But there's a passage Marx wrote where he called for labor unions. He said basically labor unions couldn't simply represent, they had to be organizing centers of the entire working class. They couldn't represent individual workplaces, right? They had to become organizing centers of the entire class. And I'm trying to find the quotation where Marx said that. Is this the quote? I think, okay, here it is, right? Okay, right. This is, Marx wrote this. He kind of realized the limits of the trade union stuff, even himself, right? Right? Yeah, let me find the quote. Apart from their original purposes, they must now learn to act deliberately as organizing centers of the working class in the broadest interests of its complete emancipation. They must aid every social and political movement tending in that direction, considering themselves and acting as the champions and representatives of the whole working class. They cannot fail to enlist the non-society elements into their ranks. They must look carefully in the interest of the worst paid trades. Yeah, that's the quote, right? Where Marx basically says that labor unions shouldn't simply represent their own members. They need to become organizing centers of the entire working class. And that's what Marx wrote even in his day. Even at the height of factory production, he was understanding that if labor unions, if they just focused on we're the workers in this factory versus our employer, it's not going to work, right? And then if you read What Is to Be Done by Vladimir Lenin, Lenin spends that book ranting against what he calls economism, which is that basically the communists in Russia, all they did was when there was a strike, they would run to it and announce, oh, we're a political party that supports labor unions. And that was called tailism, and that was called bowing to spontaneity. And that it was simply, it was, they said it was revolutionary because we're lending the economic struggle a political character. And Lenin says, that's not your job. Your job is to make a revolution. And that tailism and bowing to spontaneity and just kind of being a trade union secretary was not what you needed. You needed an organization of revolutionaries. And that's what Is to Be Done by Vladimir Lenin is largely about. He says that, look, yes, trade unions are important, but like the trade union struggle in and of itself, we need a revolutionary organization that maybe is involved in the trade union struggle. But, Lenin is writing about economism and tailism, and bowing to spontaneity. Go read What Is to Be Done. So even then Lenin comes along and says, yeah, it's not, the worker boss thing is not really what it's about. And then Lenin also had his theory of imperialism. And he said that ultimately it'll be entire nations struggling against imperialism. That'll be the basis of how socialism comes into the world. And we're not just fighting capitalism, we're fighting imperialism. So fast forward to our time, Javier Milei, why was he elected in Argentina? He was elected because Argentina's laws, labor laws, are written in a way that gig economy workers don't have protections. Gig economy workers in Argentina are considered small business owners. And the laws are written in such a way that they don't get protections. And that your average gig economy worker competes with other gig economy workers. Uber drivers compete with other Uber drivers to get rides, right? And they depend on their own kind of go-get-em attitude and their own kind of ingenuity. And they don't see the other Uber drivers as their class brothers on the assembly line. They see them as their competitors. And that we're entering a period where, because of the gig economy, every worker kind of sees himself as a what do you call it? As a small business owner, while he's being exploited by a huge multinational corporation. And they still are, right? Uber drivers are being exploited by Uber, right? You go down, but the gig economy worker doesn't have the same, relationship to his employer or his fellow workers that a factory worker has. Ultimately, what Marx wrote about being an organizing center of the entire class for labor unions, how their only future was they had to basically just become, centers of entire working class power. What Lenin wrote about how, okay, labor unions are good, but we're trying to create a group to seize control of the government. We're not really trying to create a union. Unions can help us do that. And now we're in a new phase where what they've written has escalated to the point that ultimately we're not fighting for the workers to overthrow the capitalists. We're fighting for a government to come into power that represents the overwhelming majority, which is the working class, that will break the power of the big monopolies and control the economy in order to stimulate growth. That's what we're fighting for. And it's a lot like what China had. They had a block of 4 great classes: the workers, the peasants, the merchants, and even the national bourgeoisie. We want to create what William Z. Foster talked about, an anti-monopoly coalition. That'll include business owners, that'll include, that'll include workers, that'll include, unemployed people, that'll include even wealthy people that are against the degrowth big monopolies. We want a government that is populist and anti-imperialist that will break the power of the big monopolies and control the economy to make sure there is long-term growth, right? And so the worker boss thing doesn't really work exactly. We are struggling against the rich, and we are fighting for the majority that is suffering at the hands of the ultra-rich. But it doesn't line up in that classic Marxian way of the factory worker versus the factory owner, right? And Lenin said, yeah, we're entering the stage of imperialism. It's not that. And we're entering a new phase where it is huge multinational corporations that are keeping the world poor versus the ultra rich that are trying to march us toward World War III in a low wage police state. And ultimately it will be for the benefit of all society. And I honestly think that the debate between Marx and Düring, right? Engels wrote this book, Anti-Düring. You read it, Düring was arguing for socialism, not on the basis of struggle, but on the basis of this is in the interest of the entire nation, a harmony of interests. And I think if you look at what China is doing, and if you look at what a lot of communist and anti-imperialist governments are doing, they're not fighting for one group against another group. They're fighting for all of society against imperialism. And so that kind of reopens what Düring wrote and what Friedrich List, the economist in Germany, wrote about, and that it's not that simple. And that classic Marxian thinking, it just doesn't work. And that people that stick to that dogmatically, the whole worker cooperative thing, socialism has nothing to do with the government. It just means that the employees have stock in the company. There's a reason that stuff is so toxic, because it has no bearing on what we're doing, right? Every time I've seen Jacobin magazine, the clowns at Jacobin magazine, who are Zionists, who are paid for by the Jewish Communal Fund. Israel, Jacobin is an Israeli propaganda outlet, by the way. It's funded by Israel. Ben Norton, of all people, actually revealed that. It's funded by the Jewish Communal Fund, which is a pro-Israeli foundation. Jacobin magazine many times has had a debate with the Reason Foundation, the libertarians. And the libertarians get up there and they say communism killed a gajillion million people and the market is magical and will solve all the problems. And they just give you the standard libertarian thing. And then it goes back to Jacobin. And then they say, we don't want state socialism. We agree with you. We don't want the state. We want socialism made voluntarily by cooperatives. And then it goes back to Jacobin and they say, no one's stopping you. You can start your cooperative. And it's just the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And it's like neoliberal arguments never get refuted. And it's just a bunch of malarkey, right? And this happens so much, and I've seen this over and over and over again of this worker co-op crap, right? That is just, there's no law against forming a worker cooperative. You can form a worker cooperative. There's plenty of companies that have employee stock ownership programs. That doesn't eliminate the chaos of the market. It doesn't deal with the problem of overproduction and the market being glutted with products. It doesn't deal with any of the problems of capitalism. So, and the people that fetishize in particular that Marx worker versus bosses thing, they're not living in this century. That's not the way the economy is working, right? We're heading toward an economy where every worker thinks he's a small business owner as he's being exploited by a huge financial monopoly. So anyway, folks, I'm at the end of my rope. I'm exhausted. So thank you, Gabby, for asking your question. Thank you, everyone who asked their questions. And on that note, I am going to put on the closing music, but we'll be back probably tomorrow night. If not tomorrow night, the next night, right? We do these streams. It's great. Dare to struggle, dare to win. But join the Center for Political Innovation. We're doing it. We're building a real organization. Get involved. New upsurge. in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.